on. And needless to say, please raise your hands if you want to speak. And hopefully, if I don't spot them, then Liz will. And please leave your mic turned off unless you're speaking. Having said that sort of preamble, it's a pleasure really to welcome everybody to the meeting, both members and officers, and also take the opportunity to wish you a happy, hopefully prosperous, hopefully healthy new year as well. So, now that Christmas celebrations are over, now we're settling down to the hard work again. Yeah, unfortunately, but there we go. Okay, if I can move on to the agenda, item 1 is, oh sorry, Louise, I should have welcomed you as well as a cabinet member. My apologies. Anyway,
no problem. Apologies again for not being there in person.
No problem. Apologies, Liz. Have we any?
We haven't received any apologies today, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Item 2 is disclosures of personal interests. I don't know if anybody has got anything that they want to declare in that respect or disclose. I'm not seeing anybody indicating. So in that case, we move on to item 3, which is prohibition over votes and declaration of party whips. Item 4 is the minutes of the previous meeting. You've all had a fair amount of time to have a good look through them, read them and have a look at the letters as well. I don't know if you've got any comments or any queries to raise. If not, I'll assume that you're happy with them and ask just for a proposal that they be accepted. Thank you, Wendy, and seconded. Thank you, Sue. So I'll move on quickly to item 5, which is the letters, which I've already mentioned, which we've said you've had a chance to read, and we're always grateful for the responses, Louise, I have to say that. They're always interested. And then item 6 is public question time. I don't think we've had any of these. I'll be quite surprised if we do get one, but you never know. It has to be on the agenda. Item 7 then, back to the substantive part, really, I suppose, in terms of the agenda. Which is the update on the Child and Family Improvement Programme. I know Louise wants to introduce this, so I'm going to ask you, Louise, if you'd like to take over, and then we'll hand over Julio. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just point out just a couple of things. Thank you very much to panel for giving us the opportunity to bring this update outlining the work towards our transformation and ongoing commitment to improvement work across the service. Thank you also to Julie and Lindsay for preparing the report. Hopefully all are, this is not a lot sort of new in terms of what our priorities and things that are. Hopefully everyone's very aware of those and of course the challenges that we've been facing. Under prevention and early help, you'll see there in section 2.1.1 the work that's been done around emotional health and well-being. This is mostly sitting with under Councillor Gwillim's portfolio in terms of the early help, but this is a really important area which is we've had a huge demand in terms of support in this growth area, and it's really vital that we get this right for our children and young people. Everyone should be familiar with the excellent work of our CMET team, hopefully award nominated CMET team, for the work that they've been doing there, which is supporting young people in our communities and also the wider communities around them, and some really excellent work going on there. But just to flag the concern that the funding for this does, as it's referenced in the report, does run out in March of this year. It's Home Office funding, but or Justice funding. Home Office. I can't see if Lindsay or Julie are nodding. Hopefully you can correct me on that if I'm wrong. But we are really committed to this approach. So obviously we're going to be looking at, if that's not clear, how that's going to continue, how we continue with this really, really important work. The reference there to the short breaks reviews that's going on, and how we can expand and further develop this offer, because it is so important for children and young people with disabilities, with neurodiversity, and our care experienced young people, and for their families and their carers to be able to have that opportunity for respite and for really, some really interesting and fulfilling experiences as part of short breaks. Another really a growth area in terms of demand is requests for support in regards to neurodiversity. We know that the waiting list for formal diagnosis are very long, and families are often really unsure of how to kind of where to go and what to do. So we're really keen to make sure that we offer support at the earliest opportunity to help build that resilience, and hopefully preclude the need to more escalating support further on. And it doesn't matter if you've had a formal diagnosis or not. We make sure we get that support to people as they need it. As everyone is probably well aware, we've had a lot of discussions about placement sufficiency, which is our second priority area. We're still really committed to developing regional approaches and expanding our own in-house residential offer. Hopefully we might have a bit more of an update on that. I'm not sure if Lindsay or Julie is able to give us a bit more detail on what's going on with that at the moment. And then finally, last but not least, our workforce is a big priority, our greatest asset. We have a hugely hardworking teams across the service who need to be appropriately supported and valued and recognised and given the chance to progress. I'm sure everyone is aware that recruitment is a huge challenge nationwide, and we've been doing a lot of work in terms of growing our own and having that progression from our academy through into the different teams. And then I just wanted to highlight as well, you'll see at the end of the report there our continuing focus on children and young people's voice in recruitment and in developing the service. And I think a couple of members of the panel are also on our corporate parenting board, and you'll have met our new Youth Parliament representative, and I'm sure he's going to do a fantastic job representing young people in Swansea, and particularly our care experience population as well. So it's again a really important area. So those are just a few bits that I wanted to highlight. I'm sure Lindsay can give us a bit more detail and take questions as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Excuse me. So you want to say some more on it, Lindsay or Julie? Lindsay, is it?
Happy to go through. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Louise. Nice brief overview. Obviously, the areas, you'll all be familiar with the areas that we cover in terms of prevention, early intervention and placement sufficiency alongside workforce, as Louise has just shared. In terms of prevention and early intervention, so for emotional health and wellbeing, the steering group has been created to ensure children receiving the most appropriate support. Platform has also been identified as the new organisation linked in with the schools to offer support to pupils. They have their own website and also online resources for children and staff. There's also a duty system implemented for those on waiting for services for early help, and this means they can be stepped up or stepped down if things are escalating. So whilst they're on the waiting list, they're not sat there without support. They check in with them, make sure that things are okay, and if there's an escalation, then they step them up into support earlier than they could do, rather than sitting on the waiting list over a period of time. We also have the single point of entry within family support, which is offering the right support at the right time. So it's a lot more targeted, working with children, young people, parents, and also professionals to make sure that we're understanding what matters to children and young people and getting that support in place. And we also have, in terms of additional wellbeing, Tidy Minds website for digital health and wellbeing. So there's lots of progress in that area. It's all really positive and going in the right direction. If I move on to contextual safeguarding, like Louise said, we've got CMET and CMET United, which is launched within our schools and is targeting communities. They've recently also won a Safer Communities Award for its success in driving coordinated approaches to accessing the right multi-agency services at the right time. So by ensuring timely and appropriate support, the work is recognised as having enhanced the safety and wellbeing of children and young people in Swansea, and reducing antisocial behaviour, which is a huge positive. The coordinated effort has not only improved services for young people, but has also strengthened community trust and resilience and making neighbourhoods safer with more supportive for everybody. We are still waiting to hear about further funding from March 2025 at this point in time, but we remain hopeful. Youth Endowment Fund, from the Youth Endowment Fund. If I move on to short breaks, as Louise said, very, very important resource. We are continuing to have a recruitment drive, and that also includes within the local authorities. So back in October, we put out newsletters and bulletins to share that Swansea is a fostering friendly employer, to encourage people to come forward for fostering, short breaks and respite. We make it easier for employees to foster whilst offering additional incentives, such as additional 5 days leave throughout the year, or additional time to attend meetings and other things to encourage people to become foster carers. So that enables us to build more resilience within respite and short breaks, whilst utilising the great skills that our existing workforce has. If I move on to neurodiversity, as well as the neurodiverse lead worker, Steve, within early help, the Academy have recruited 2 behavioural specialists to broaden the offer within our front door of our statutory services. And they're also able to offer support and advice at the earliest opportunity. So as soon as people are getting in touch with the front door, they're looking at what matters to the children and the young people, and that they're putting that support in place at that point to try and reduce and minimise the risk of escalation and reduce the risk of breakdown. Moving on to placement sufficiency, and I've combined this with the expansion and accommodation offer because they kind of tie in together as you're talking through. So as part of the Regional Safe Accommodation Strategy Group, we continue to collaborate with partners from across the region. I need to put my teeth back in, sorry guys. We're currently working on designing our terms of reference to assist us in prioritising our activities. Within Swansea, we're implementing a step-up, step-down model for our residential services, learning from previous experiences and feedback from young people that have been within our residential premises. We're talking to children and young people that have been in our previous residences and asking them what they felt worked well for them, anything that they would do differently or that they would like to change, and we're using that then to improve our services going forward. That's been really, really positive, and it's lovely to also speak to the young people and hear about their experiences. We also have ongoing quality assurance of our current external and internal placements. This continues within our commissioning team to ensure the best care is provided to children and young people. There's recent expansion plans for Tynant Home to incorporate 2 post-16 move-on flats. They were unfortunately not approved as financially viable by building services, so that was a bit of a knock. But we are continuing to look at other options, and searches continue for further opportunities within the property arena. In relation to workforce, so staff morale and well-being, staff continue to access a great training offer within our training and development, alongside accessing support during regular one-to-ones, supervisions, appraisals, and we also have our coaching and mentoring offer to staff. Recruitment and retention. We remain committed to growing our own social work workforce through the Social Work Academy and supporting our alternatively qualified staff to take part in the Open University Secondment scheme with a new cohort of students that are due to join us very soon. In addition to this, staff also have access to coaching and mentoring, as I said above, in staff morale and development. And these are offered in-house via the training team, via Social Care Wales and other external partners. So there's a lot of offers that are accessible out there. And we're also keen to learn from feedback with any exit interviews. So every time we have an exit interview with a member of staff, we're trying to learn what it is, what are the reasons that they left, so that we can try to improve and learn from that. In relation to induction and training, Child and Family Services are also committed to enhancing the staff induction, training and support programme with a focus on our new starters. So as soon as we have new starters, we introduce ourselves to them, we're taking them around to the teams, we ask them if they need any support, we show them all our online resources, and that sits within the Learning and Innovation team to make sure that they have the best start within their recruitment. We want to make sure that it's as welcoming and as informative as possible. The current handbook is also being updated to support them alongside training and their e-learning. And if I move on to workforce thinking, driven by the voice of the child, and I think this is the part that I have oversight of and excites me a lot, is so the work of our participation and children's rights officers continuously informing and shaping our service. So we have a number of professional participation champions who are our advisories and keep us informed about opportunities and developments for young people, whilst also sharing what matters to them and our work. We have our youth panels. They've increased internally and also across external partners. So we are seeing that a lot of other external partners are also coming forward and listening to the children and young people. So that's really good to see that branching out. We have the National Youth Parliament, which commences on the 25th of January with our elected member, Nicholas, and some of you will have met him. He's representing Swansea and he will feed back to local forums along with our corporate parenting board. We have more young people attending meetings, so their own reviews, they're sharing their feedback, whether it be their LAC reviews, whether it be their DOL reviews, offering feedback as to how they felt within our processes. We're also reaching out to young people, as I said earlier, in terms of those who have been within our residential services to learn and understand more about that because we want to be better. This rich information is helping us to adapt and provide better responses within our practice. And we also have young person panels continuing for all posts across child and family. So as well as having an interview panel, they also sit in front of our young persons panel and they have to do a presentation and answer questions. And then we sit down with the young people afterwards and say, well, what are your thoughts on the people? Give us the feedback from their questions. And that adds a lot of weight to the decision making when we are recruiting people into the service. Ultimately, we want the best practice to achieve the best outcomes for children and young people. And that brings me to the end of the report. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lindsay. Yes, I've got to remember to do that. Julie, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Lindsay. It's been a pretty challenging year for everybody. So certainly it's been challenging across child and family services. So I guess it's just to acknowledge the hard work of the team to get us to it's amazing really when you think we can still achieve some change and improvements against a backdrop of acute staffing shortages in some key areas as well as increased demand. So we're doing some fab work really. The other thing is just wanted to add to enhance what Lindsay said on our residential homes development. We've got 3 children's homes now. We are planning a 4th this year. We haven't put any detail in the report because we're still going through the formal acquisition of another property, but we're hopeful that maybe at the next scrutiny or at a further meeting, we can give you a bit more detail about confirm that that's going ahead. And then we're then looking for further properties this year to help with our development in future years. But we are pretty reliant on some Welsh Government funding to help us deliver this, both in revenue and capital, because this is part of their Welsh Government programme for change in relation to eliminating profit from the care of children. So once that new bill takes effect, then that's going to have real implications for the local authority in terms of delivering its sufficiency duty. So we're mindful of that, and also it's the right thing to be having children living in Swansea and closer to their home. We're still pressing ahead with our expansion of residential care homes for children in Swansea, and also exploring where we can have regional developments with MPT, where that works and makes sense, and we can then make use of resources available through the Regional Partnership Board. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, encouraging report. It's comprehensive as well. I suspect some members might have questions. I'm not seeing any hands up here at the moment, apart from Mike, I think.
I think Mark's first.
Mike and Mark first, is it?
No, carry on, Mike.
So if you'd like to come in, Mark.
Yeah, that's fine. Good afternoon, all. A happy New Year. I was just wondering whether the fostering promotional information could. I don't believe I receive a great deal of information about that subject. And when I'm out and about in Llangyfarch especially, I am asked about the fostering projects and people are trying to get on board. Do you have a current system where you forward all such activity information to county councillors for forwarding on their local media, social media groups? Thank you.
I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, when I get press releases and things like that. And there is a dedicated Foster Wales Swansea Facebook page, for example. So if you wanted to like that, and you can share their post. Is that there is, isn't there, or is it adoption service? Or is it? Oh, I'm getting confused
There
now.
is a
There is,
fostering.
yeah. Sorry, I said
dedicated
it and then I
fostering
thought, oh, am
page.
I wrong?
Yeah, we have.
So that would be really
Facebook.
helpful, because there's, we
Yes.
do a lot of promotional activities around Foster Fortnight, and well, all year round. I've just signed off a press release today, for example, supporting how people from different backgrounds, you don't have to be in a couple, you don't have to be young or old, we're open to foster carers. So grateful for your support, Mark, and I'm happy to, when I get stuff, I'll make sure I forward it on to all councillors.
Lovely. Thanks, Louise.
Okay, Mark?
Yes, thank you.
Now I'll go to Mike then, if I may.
Yeah, thanks. And, thanks to Louise and the officers for updating us. I think it's quite encouraging to see the progress, particularly as Julie mentioned, within the context of the difficulties there are with this whole area. So, I'm sure from a scrutiny perspective, we'd want to pass on our thanks through the officers to the staff involved and for all the work that they're doing. And, particularly encouraged, as Lindsay was mentioning, about the engagement of the young people and the voice that they're able to bring to bear. And I think that brings me on to the next point, is that the voices of the young people will enable us to determine how well things are going. And I know that, from the point of view of the what, that's clearly covered well within this particular report. And I just wanted to ask a question as to how we are looking at how well it's going. So, for example, if I could just take a couple of examples, and using 2.11, the emotional health and well-being, you formed a dedicated steering group with various agencies. How well is that steering group working? I know that the collaboration is mentioned there, but are we finding that everybody is equally engaged? Are there areas that need to be looked at? The next bullet point, in terms of creating a duty system, are we aware? Are we certain that we're picking up all of the issues? And again, it's just looking at each of those areas where we might be able to question how well those things are going, and not asking for a response now, clearly, but and I'm not necessarily saying that this is something that, from a scrutiny perspective, we'd want the detail on, but it's just a question of what the mechanisms are for ensuring that there is that element of looking at the quality. And the third point really is just thinking in terms of bearing in mind the challenges and the work that's involved. What can we do as scrutiny to kind of support the moves by the cabinet member and the officers to promote this area of work, which we all see as so important as far as the council is concerned, and more importantly, as far as the young people are concerned?
Just to add something very quickly in terms of what Mike said there, in terms of 2.1 and the emotional health and well-being. Obviously, there's a lot of work done with education. Does health get involved? I think I wasn't reading that to that extent, but perhaps you can.
So we've there's a local steering group around emotional health and wellbeing, which it's multi-agencies. So we have health represented on there, including input from CAMS, education. There's both education LA and school input, and local authority. And third sector, a number of different agencies. So it's a local group that's agreed a local implementation plan around, both in relation to delivering some programmes for change that Welsh Government have introduced, such as an STNIF framework that wraps as the concept of having a wraparound support of trusted people for children from birth to older and families, as well as helping to deliver the regional priorities around emotional wellbeing and mental health. So I guess our measures of success are working co-productively with children and people and families to understand what the needs are, and then come up with a plan that matches what their needs are, and then the progress of that plan being reported regularly into the group, with feedback from the parents and people with lived experiences about, well, what does it feel like for you? So it's important that we don't just have the data and reports from officers and partners, but actually hearing about experiences of children and people and families. That's quite an important part of that whole governance and setup. terms of the duty system, we in Child and Family, we have a weekly meeting where we check in about, well, how are things going in terms of what's come in, what have we done with it, did we do the right thing with it, so to speak. So we have regular checks about that to see how that's working, so that if it's not working, we can modify it or we can learn from it. I think that's really important. And I guess on the last point, there's always, your acknowledgement about what's working, what isn't, and then the resources we require and the support we need to do that from all quarters, really, because it's not necessarily just about the local authority input. Because to deliver some of those outcomes around emotional well-being, for example, we, as the chair has said, it's about where are health in this and where are education in this, and how we, and if Welsh Government have expectations, where is the resource if that's over and above what the local authority may have at its disposal. So I guess it's that lobbying, not just within the local authority, but maybe externally as well, and how we might be able to achieve that.
Let us know if there's anything we can do to help in that respect, I guess. If we look at the contextual safeguarding approach, obviously there's been a fair bit in the press and media recently about this. How content, if that's the right word, are you with the situation in Swansea in terms of how we're managing the situation?
In the information that's in the press at the moment, I think, is mainly around child sexual exploitation, CSE, because that was the report that XCJ, the inquiry that she led on, which feels like ages ago now, which a lot of local authorities, I think, including us, contributed to. So I think when I first came to Swansea, that we were just the conclusion of giving our evidence. And I'm confident in terms of our position that we've moved on considerably in relation to our understanding of not just sexual exploitation of children, but also criminal exploitation and all forms of exploitation, really. So we've got a very strong, not just within the service, but multi-agency setup at an operational and a strategic level to help in our understanding of, are we doing the right things in the right way, and what impact and what difference is that making? And I think we've seen from responses to local incidents the benefits of that and the strengths of that, when there's been incidents in Swansea where there's been some stabbings a couple of years ago, and we got together and responded quickly, including how we support people in schools when there've been incidents within communities. So we're not complacent. We're always very alive to, we may have implemented that recommendation, but actually, what does that look like now? What difference is that making? So we're not just accepting that we've ticked a box and moved on. We're continuing to evolve. And I think because we have this specialist team, that's helping us better understand, particularly with the working within localities, what is going on in communities and how we can work best alongside and with communities. It's not just about professionals, it's also about working with communities.
Thank you. I was intrigued a little bit in the expansion of accommodation offers, because you've mentioned plans which we haven't had approved effectively with building services, etc. How much, to what extent is this setting you back time-wise?
I think it's not too much, because that would have been an ideal solution, because it's quite common model to have, where you have a residential children's home to have some move on training flats, they sometimes call them, to help with developing independent living skills. So then to help move on to live independently. So we've just modified our model, really. So I think time-wise, in terms of creating that provision, it won't impact that. It's just perhaps more the location of it. So yeah, it's not too much of a hindrance. We were just sad, I guess, that it couldn't be on that site, but for practical reasons, just because of the ground.
Sorry, that was a question I wanted to pick up on as well, which is why I was pushing there. It was on the expansion of accommodation. Obviously, you must have been really disappointed, given that these move-on flats are so important, aren't they? When you're looking for further accommodation now, or the facility to have move-on flats, is that going to be part of the criteria for the additional accommodation? Or are you looking at something, as you say, are you revising the model completely to look for something different?
What I would say is that nothing's off the table, because we need to still be flexible and creative in our thinking, because I think if we rule anything out, we might miss an opportunity. So I guess we're coming up with various different models of how we could expand and develop our residential services provision. So some of it might be something you could commission out. So for example, Bernardo's at the moment are commissioned to deliver training flat provision, which is working well. So that might be something we could expand, or it's something we could attach to a future residential children's home. So yeah, we're not going to rule anything out at this stage.
Yeah, the one point I was going to come back on and probably show my ignorance now in terms of what I'm saying, but in terms of short breaks, and really I assume we're talking about respite here as much as anything else, aren't we? From what you said, the impression I got, the accommodation is coming from people who are temporary fostering, basically, because obviously you haven't got the residential buildings for it. So where do people go for the respite?
So there's different forms of respite. There's regulated respite, which is what we can offer through our foster carers, and that can be to help children stay with their families. So we can offer just some short-term intervention to work with the family, or it can be to give their normal foster carers a break, so they can have that the placements remain stable, because sometimes children, their level of need is such that parents, including foster carers, need a break. And then we have other forms of respite, some commission services. I guess it's the terminology, and it can mean different things. So we've brought, I think, a report here before about like Tilora, where that's overnights and daytime provision for respite and short breaks for children with additional needs. So it's a mixture of offers depending on the child's circumstances. So there can be foster carers, or it could be the residential provision in Tilora, or it could be daytime, like daycare provision for children.
And the caravans as well, we've got.
Oh yes,
yeah.
we have those caravans. I think there's 2 that can offer overnights, weekends, or week-long breaks for children with staff on site, or children with their families, or even just the families on their own without their children. To have so in terms of offering, in recognition and in compliance with our statutory duties around offering support for children and parents where there's additional need, the children have additional needs, then that's part of that offer.
Okay, thank you. Before I move on from this item, anybody else got any comments that they want to make or raise? In that case, thank you, Lindsay, for your report. I think it was quite comprehensive, as I say, and obviously Mike has said a lot of things in respect of the work that the staff do over the years, and we are very grateful for that, and please pass on our thanks. Okay. On that basis, if I may, I will move on to item 8, the performance monitoring. Are you going to take us through this, Julie?
I'll just do a brief intro, and Lindsay will go. You'll notice this is the October report and it's now January. It's just timing, and also because we did have some staffing capacity challenges, along with needing to send in the Welsh Government return, which we had some challenges with in getting the data. So I've just signed off the November report. So I accept that this is perhaps a little bit out of date now, but Lindsay will reference and give you some updates where they're relevant. But the overall picture, I think, in broad terms, hasn't changed that much, but we are continuing to evolve how we present information and pull information together, and we're trying to bring greater visibility to all parts of the service now, so you get a broader sense of every aspect of it. We're not quite there yet, but we are getting there.
Thank you, Julie. I'll go through the key highlights of the report. As Julie said, the report is from October, but I've also got the live data as it stands for today to kind of share. So SPOC received an increase in contacts of 19.5%. So that was up 209 contacts from September. So that was quite an increase. We were looking to understand that and whether that was in relation to after the holidays. In early help, we also saw an increase of 65%, rising to 152 contacts compared to 92 throughout September. Demand also increased in our emergency duty team with 56 contacts compared to 40 in September. In addition to this, EDT supported an additional 72 cases that are already open to child and family. And what that means is that they don't come through as new referrals because they are already open to EDT, but it is additional work that EDT have had to undertake with cases that are active within child and family. So that also adds a lot of pressure to them. As you can see, 72 cases is quite a significant amount within a month. The number of children on the Child Protection Register has remained stable at 189. There has been a slight drop. The live figure today is at 177. So we are seeing that slight decline there. Looked after figures in October reduced from 500 to 494. Again, the live figure as it is today is 472. We are continuing to work with our care experience young people to further develop opportunities and services for young people who are looked after, and they are attending a lot more of their meetings so that they can be a lot more productive and we're listening to what matters to them. So that's hugely positive. Emergency placements increased from 5 to 7. However, they have since dropped again. The live figure today is 5. And what I mean by emergency placements is young people who are going to, so they present as homeless. So not emergency placements where we haven't got any. It's where they present to us as a local authority as homeless and we have to support them to find accommodation. Family support also saw an increase in referrals during October, and again, they continue to rise. I think overall there's been a general increase in demand for services, but what we are seeing is a slight reduction on child protection figures and also our children who are looked after, which is really positive. That is the overview that I have from the report.
One thing I'd like to add to that, Chair, if I may, is that I've asked to be included in future reports some information to give you a sense of our staffing capacity, because although the demand, the numbers may be lower, we haven't got enough staff to meet the demand that we currently have, and I thought it would be helpful for you to have a sense of that in particular key areas. So the teams that deal with child protection and court, although the academy model is working well, that's then they're feeding through newly qualified social workers, and we are still in a position where some of the experienced social workers are choosing to move across to other posts, either within the authority or other local authorities, because of the enormous pressure that the teams face because of having, because it just feels as though you're going around in circles sometimes. So I thought it would be helpful to, and there's other areas where we sometimes have workforce pressures. So I think to give you a sense of how we're managing the demand and how we're able to, and to give you some reassurances about how we can still deliver a safe and effective service, even when sometimes we face those staffing challenges against the backdrop of the numbers changing, but the complexity is not necessarily changing, if that makes sense.
So are you in a situation where you're having to use agency staff at the moment?
Yes. However, we don't have many agency staff at the moment, but where we need agency staff, we're not able to recruit experienced agency social workers to work in child protection and court areas. So where we need agency social workers to work on child protection or court cases, there aren't any social workers that are coming, agency social workers that are available. We can get agency social workers in fostering, where we need them in the fostering team, agency social workers in our looked after children team, in our front door team, but we're not able to recruit any agency social workers in the child protection and court teams at the moment.
It's in the legal area that we're struggling.
Mm-hmm.
I said then it's in the legal areas that where the problem seems to be in terms of staffing at the moment. Yeah, okay. Just so we understand, I think. Was that it? Okay. Anybody got any questions coming up? Anybody got any questions coming out of this that they want to ask? Okay. I might have one or two. Very simply, first of all, something that came up at the last meeting on page 2021, 36, 37, whichever way you're looking at it. All right. There was talk there about Base Plus. And certainly I wasn't aware until you sort of mentioned it last time that we'd now taken that in-house. So where are we exactly with that in that system with that transition stage, if you like? Well, coming out of child and family services, moving toward adult services, or moving out into real life.
So you mean not in terms of the service coming up from Bernardo's over to the council, but in terms of how we're transitioning young people from child and family to
they
adult?
are mixed, aren't they? They're related.
So in terms of the way the service works in relation to care experienced young people, so when they turn 16, if they're no longer in care, if they leave care because they can at 16 in certain circumstances, then they're allocated a young person's advisor. And then we would ensure that they receive their statutory entitlement in terms of support as a care leaver. And then depending on their level of need, they may need to transition into adult services. It's probably less likely for a 16, 17-year-old and more likely for an 18-year-old. So where before a young person reaches 18, where they have a higher level of need, then we have a transitioning on group within Child and Family Services, which consists of a range of different officers from Child and Family, including the young person's advisor and their social worker, and then also officers from Adult Services and Education, and I'm not sure we've got health there yet, but we have housing there. And we talk about what that young person's plan needs to look like as they move towards 18 and once they're post 18. And so we endeavour to plan in advance how they can transition into. So if they have a high level of need and they may need ongoing accommodation from adult services, or it could be something we commission jointly with health, we plan that together through that transitioning on group. And I think since we brought in-house the care leaver service, the young person's advisor, we've been able to create a much more collaborative approach to doing that and working together to achieve that for the young people in a timely way.
So obviously Bernardo's were providing a service.
For care leave, yeah, for young person's advisors, which is a statutory requirement. Yeah.
That is still happening, is it?
No, that's
what you've taken back in-house.
The staff that were
Okay.
employed by Bernardo's have come over to Child and Family Services.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the transition was challenging, as most things are. The staff were cheated across, but I think the sense I would say now it's everything's settled. And the team are really positive. We had a sight of a lovely feedback session that the young person's advisors did with some young people, gave feedback about the young person's advisor, and the feedback that they provided about the young person's advisors on why it worked well and what they could do differently, what they could do better, and where their life was. It was quite profound, really. So I feel really positive about that service and its impact, but it relies on working in partnership with others to achieve the best outcomes for care experienced young people.
I probably could go on with a few more questions, but probably there's nothing of that particularly significance in that sense, I don't think, in what I've got here. But
Chair, I was just going to say, I know the Base Plus team have brought a really good presentation to corporate parenting. Perhaps that's something, if I'm not speaking out of turn, Julie, Lindsay, they could perhaps bring to Scrutiny for something you wanted to explore further.
Yeah, happy to do that if Chair and panel.
I think it's something that we can look at in terms of the work programme going forward, certainly, because it is obviously a very important area at the end of the day. At the end of that period, let's put it that way, rather than the end of the day. But yes, I think the same with comments as before. A lot of data there, but I'm not sure what it's telling you half the time because I can't see the trends. Certainly not telling me a lot. So I'm just wondering how you manage and use that data in that respect then.
Yeah, so in terms of trends, we look at our annual report and we also look at the CAP charts. So we were putting the CAP charts in it, but what we ended up was a really, really long report. So now we're looking at how we present that in the best way possible. So although we still track it annually and we still present that annual report, principal officers and managers of individual teams have their own specific reports with monthly data where there's the individual CAP charts so that you can see the trends, the flows, any breaks so that we can determine what has happened there and then look at, right, okay, how do we resolve that going forward? It's just difficult to know what to present to certain forums, but if there is anything more that's needed, we can certainly add it in. But it gets a lengthy report, as you can imagine, to include everything. It's finding a balance.
Just looking at the single point of contacts received, going from 1076 to 1285, and that looks like a big increase, and it looks like a problem. But when you look at the graph, the trend is slightly upwards, but not to the extent that those two individual figures would suggest. And that's where I think that trending becomes so important, so you can actually see historical data all at the same time and see which way things are going, because once you start evening those peaks and troughs out, and you can draw the line for that statistically, and you've got very clever machines and people which will do that for you quite nicely to show exactly which way it's going. And that's what I would be certainly looking for from my point of view if I was managing this sort of department. That's what I used to look for myself.
We've tried to introduce a different way of looking at the data. So the upper and lower control limits that are on that on page 19. So we've looked back probably about 3 years to give us that. So what's the busiest we've been, and what's the quietest we've been, and what's the average, to then help us think about, well, if we stay within, and then understanding what that demand looked like, and to help us then think, well, if that's that's the busiest we've been, that's the quietest we've been, and if we, as long as we stay within those, then the resource we've got to deliver the service means we can deliver a safe and effective service. But if we're looking at the highs and the lows, because if we go above or below, then we should be having a conversation about what's going on. Is it because people aren't referring in? Is it because we haven't got enough staff? Have we got too many staff? Has the system failed? To help us then think about the use of our resources, and also as well as our systems and processes, and have we got the thresholds right? What's going on in schools? And I guess that's it's understanding what that means in the context of how we might traditionally have looked at trends. We're trying to think about it a little bit differently, I guess. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Again, I got to put that. It's the trends that give you the upper and lower limits, and
Yes, yeah.
that's as long as you're working within those, you've got a fair idea where you're going.
Yeah.
And if you're starting to move one way or the other
We need to
outside of those, that's when it gets
have a look
something
at it.
that you really need to investigate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I just add another further comment, just visually as well? If we bring a report and you see a split in it, because we've got the upper and lower in there, the data, when you input it, it will show a split if it's a significant difference, so that we can then start to investigate that. So when we are showing you data at a later date, if there is a split in there, that we would then
So
kind of investigate.
what do you mean by a split? And a change in the upper and lower limits?
So it would be a change in the data. So if this is a significant increase, it would create a split so that you would be able to see it. It would be a line through it. And so if there was a significant increase, so although you're saying there's an increase of 200, it wouldn't be significant over a 3-year period. So you would have an official line in there just visually, so that you would know, right, okay, what do we need to look at here? It would draw your attention to that specific moment. So it makes it a bit easier for us to watch those trends, but obviously there aren't any significant differences here to share, but I can bring an example next time, just visually for people to be aware of that.
Obviously, there is a huge amount of data. You obviously have to be selective in what you're looking at in terms of really managing and controlling a department, I guess. And no doubt you know exactly what you're looking for yourselves. So it's just my thoughts in certain senses that how important trends are. And I'll keep saying that forever and a day, I guess. So I'm sorry to bore the rest of the members of that. So I'll apologise on that score. One final question now, one final opportunity. If anybody's got any questions in terms of this report. In that case, I'll say thank you very much.
No, it's me. Paxton.
Sue, sorry.
No, can I just ask, are trends for the Christmas period significantly different for the staff to deal with, you know? I just wondered if that was part of what we should be looking at the different trends at different times of the year.
We do see significant differences over Christmas, like we do within school holidays, but it would vary depending on the area you're in, because there are some areas that would see a decrease because people are doing other things and not kind of I guess a good example would be children are not in school, so we would have less referrals from school because whilst they're off, we don't have any. But there may be increase in other areas because children are not in school, so they're out in the community. So we do see those. At this point in time, we don't have our report for over Christmas period, but we do see those trends like in the holidays, and we would include the rationale in the report as to if we've seen a dip, if we think it's because of Easter break or because of Christmas holidays, we would add that rationale in there.
So I think what I would say is that those are the usual trends. There's nothing, if we see something out of the ordinary, so we haven't got the usual dip in the school holidays or the usual dip at Christmas, if it's a little bit high, we'll wonder why. And we haven't seen that. We have seen some increases. For example, when the government introduced the early release scheme, we saw a considerable increase in inquiries to the front door for information. So that then led us to have some conversations with probation service about how we could resource that, because we were struggling with capacity to resource that. And that was in that particular month or a few months, that was then we could see that quite readily from that uppy downy graph. So they are helpful to back up what we're saying. What you're feeling on the front door, you've got the hard evidence and the hard data to say, well, there were more contacts that month. What was going? Oh yes, that scheme was introduced, and that's probably why it was. And then when we interrogated it further, we could see that the source of the contacts was the probation service. So that then.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Sue. Yes, it's those abnormal fluctuations, which is something that you need to look at, isn't it? At that point in time, I think all the questions have now been exhausted. On that basis, once again, thank you very much for the report. I'll sit down with you one day and you can take me through one by one and item by item, and then I won't ask so many questions here then afterwards. Okay, and thank you very much for the report, as I say, and thank you for what's going on there. Item 9. Very quickly, you can go if you want to, but we're only going to be about 30 seconds, so you might as well stay for that. I think is the work plan. I think members have had a chance to see it. Very importantly, in the 17th of February now, we will have the meeting to look at the budgets for both child and family services and adult services, and then we will feed in out thoughts to that for the following day for the service improvement scrutiny panel. Then going on through February and April, we've got another 3 meetings with May as well in there this year, this municipal year. You can see what's there at the moment. We see no reason to change that particular meeting schedule as it stands, unless you've got any comments or want to say anything about it. So I'll open over to you again, members. Again,
Can we add what Louise suggested with the bays presentation? Can we add that into our work plan?
I wonder, Chair, whether we, on the 5th of February, 25th of February, there's a briefing on supported living for young people leaving care. We could perhaps incorporate it into that, if you were content with that, because that does cover part of it. We could broaden it a little bit to bring it here, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Julie. Okay, Sue?
Yeah,
that makes sense. Okay,
yes.
Thank you very much. We'll do that then if we may. So, if there's nothing else, I will now close the meeting and say thank you very much for everybody for their input. Thank you for being here. And as I said at the start, happy, healthy, prosperous new year to everybody. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So long.